Sacred Geometry. "The theory is very simple," the old Persian said, while in the background Rachmaninoff's Rhapsody on a Theme by Paganini was softly playing. "We speculate on the volatility of exchange rates and profit from the continuing fluctuation of a currency pair. In doing so, we operate in quick succession within seconds and realize our profit in the fifth and fourth digit of the exchange rate. The unit that indicates the change at this point is called pip. This is a tick in the smallest possible price movement. Through your broker's account, you open positions in the agreed currency. With such a broker, mirror trading is possible, which means that whenever you open a trading position, your followers can see this because trade is automatically opened with them as well. Every registered trader has access to your position list. As soon as you close a transaction, it will be visible in your history. Your contact person only needs to view your trading history to see the results. This trading strategy is called scalping. Trades are opened and closed in 3 to 180 seconds with minimal profit. Many traders trade this way. The opening and closing values of each position must now be converted into letters by simple geometrical conversion. So, you can communicate from any internet access, undisturbed and in plain view, without anyone noticing. Since you can decide for yourself at what value you want to enter and exit in the respective currency or highly speculative trading derivatives, the contracts for difference, or CFDs, you can always let the desired letters appear in your trading history. It is irrelevant whether you make a profit or a loss. Only the numerical values are relevant. To an outsider, your trading seems arbitrary, a rise and fall of profits and losses. But if you know the coding scheme, you will always receive your message within seconds, absolutely tap-proof and in public at the time that is relevant for you, visible to everyone and therefore inconspicuous. Clearing his throat briefly, the wiry tall man interrupted his explanations. Then he continued, "The main pillar of asymmetric warfare is communication. If secure communication is not possible, everything else becomes obsolete and is doomed to failure. Just try it," the old man said to Bio. The young man sat at the computer and logged on to the mirror trade broker. "Send a message to Minuteman 23. The young man looked at the CFD list and currency pairs and clicked on the US oil CFD, starting at 58,512. He waited a few minutes, closed the position again, and then clicked on the British pound and Japanese yen's currency exchange rate. He opened GBP/JPY at the price of 120,15. Again, he closed a few minutes later. Without turning his eyes away from the monitor, he commented, 5 is the first number, the sum of 23, 2 plus 3, which we find at Minuteman 23, open, unencrypted, without using the template. We now know what to look for, sequences of numbers that begin with a 5. US oil, starting price 58,512, fits. The second digit is an 8, the 8th letter in the alphabet is a H, the beginning of the message. The third digit is again a 5, the E in the alphabet. It is followed by a 12, equals L. What next? I opened GBH/JPY with 120,15. 12 plus 0 makes a second L. The 15 is an O. The message to Minuteman 23 is, hello. The old man nodded briefly as a sign of appreciation. Now go to the directory of signal providers and find your contact person. The young man switched to the list of several thousand signal-providing traders, which he scanned down to the end. He stopped at a signal provider called 133PS. Next to it was a flag from the Arabian region and the picture of a white stallion. "That's the contact person. That should be him," he said. "PS is not the abbreviation for horsepower, but SAM, and the numerical value 133 stands for the 133rd Psalm." The young man recited in Hebrew, "Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity." "Yes," said the old man and waited. The young man switched to the 133PS trading history and noticed that it was speculating on the exchange rate between the euro and the dollar. A moment later, the trade was closed with a profit of 3 pips. The trader had opened 5 more trades in various CFDs and currency pairs within the last minutes. 3 of the transactions were still open. The young man read the letters' numerical values: S-A-L-O-M. Then he opened several trades himself and wrote O-V-E-or. Good. Now you are ready for communication, the old man said, and he turned to go. From now on, you will have to spend a lot of time in front of the computer, and for our next meeting, I expect you to do a website analysis. He scribbled something on a post-it pad and placed the sticky note on the monitor. Bio nodded and stared at the small yellow bit of paper with the green writing. The top-level domain ended in .su. This domain ending stands for the Soviet Union, he thought. A domain that was supposed to be deleted with the dissolution of the USSR, but still exists today in 2006. He entered the address into the browser, and on the home page, the biography of William Delbert Gann opened in Russian on a graphically stylized, closely written parchment scroll. Bio skimmed over the explanations and navigated further through the site. He came across the description of Gann's theorems of Forex and found an electronic library of the works of this eccentric stock exchange trader. The wealth of material amazed him, and he downloaded all the writings. If this is an insider tip, he mused, the website should not be listed in the search engines. He immediately tried the most common search engines. In all of them, the site was listed right at the top. Why did the mentor insist on this website if it is accessible to everyone? He wondered. Then he began to search for the site holder, but his search was unsuccessful. The domain owner hid his name. Through the contact email, he came to the website of a dog breeding company in the Russian Far East, specializing in rare Japanese dog breeds. Strange, he muttered, but decided not to think about it any longer at that moment. Instead, he searched his memory for more details about Gann's life. He remembered that this trader was excellent at selling his ideas, but as a speculator, he had never succeeded in proving their general validity by his own actions on the stock exchange. The theory did not pass the practical test, but the sale of this theory was an economic success nevertheless, he reflected. And suddenly the message his mentor wanted to convey became clear to him. Money is only an illusion, Bio noted, but with real consequences for people's lives. Chapter 18. Over the next few days, Bio traded successfully or read the books he had to work through and analyze. He traded and waited. One afternoon, he registered a new follower, Blade Runner, a trader from Ethiopia, as a signaling trader. Blade Runner had closed one trading position in South African Rand/Euro with a profit of 10.70. The young man thought for a moment. 1.10.7, First Book of Moses, Genesis, the first book of the Bible. Chapter 10, paragraph 7, the sons of Cush. Cush was black, one of the grandsons of the prophet Noah. An ally. Bingo! It struck Bio. He looked at the trader's scalping results and entered the word S-H-E-M-O-T, the Hebrew name for Exodus, the second book of Moses, in numerical code. A joyful feeling seized him. He knew that he had just received his first assignment. Bio began scanning the trader list of signalmen until he came across a South African signalman by the name of Zulu Trader. He checked the trading results but could not make sense of it. Then he searched further and discovered Rastafari, a trader from Jamaica. Exodus, he thought. Right, that was the title of a song by Bob Marley, and he was from Jamaica. That could be it. He decoded. Intercept, bring to safety. The message was still incomplete. He searched the list again, found Reggae Man, and decoded. In 2HU85.13. He grew more and more excited. Part of the message was still missing. He had to find another signal generator. Time was running out. He scanned the signal heads for flags of African origin. Then he reached the end of the list. He must have missed something, that was for sure. Bio took a deep and calming breath and said to himself, no defeat will be too great to give up, and no victory too small not to create something greater. Chapter 19. Time was of the essence, but the young man remained calm and composed. Once again he began to scan the traders on the list, this time by name. Kingston the King. His heart rate rose. A trader from Sweden. Kingston, the capital of Jamaica. That had to be him. Please, please be the right one, he whispered to himself. He switched to the site with all 3 traders' open positions, found the positions closed today, and started to decode the trading results. Intercept X, bring to safety, defection 13, U85, address. A cafe in the west of the city, and in the open trades it said, in 2H. He looked at the opening time of open trades, 47 minutes to go. He glanced swiftly at the clock. He immediately got up, slipped on his basketball t-shirt with the number 85 and stormed off. He had to intercept someone and bring them to number 13. Now he knew his assignment. Chapter 20. When Bio entered the restaurant, he noticed that it was crowded. He looked at no one. A tall young woman with gorgeous white blonde hair casually gazed at him. For a millisecond, he perceived the dull shimmer of her emerald green eyes. She wore high heels and sat with several men and women at a long table by the window. They spoke Russian with each other and laughed loudly every so often. No one else cared about him. A poster of Bob Marley was hanging above the door to the restrooms. He read the words, "No woman, no cry," and headed for the door. At that moment, the tall Russian woman stood up and followed him. They passed through the door in quick succession. They looked at each other briefly as they went toward the restrooms. That incredible green, the young man thought to himself, and nodded at the woman. They went to the back exit. The door to the small side street was already open. On the wall of the house opposite was a poster with the inscription, Alfred Dublin, Babylonian Transformation. But Dublin's book is called Babylonian Wandering, the young man thought. Under the poster were 2 bicycles, not locked. The left one was red, the right one blue. He knew what that meant, for he knew the system of the Kabbalah. Gevura and Gedula, he muttered. Fear of God and love of God in harmony. Another sign on the way toward the goal. He looked at the bicycles and then at the woman's high heels. Just take off your shoes and leave them here, he said in a casual tone. You won't get far with your 5-inch heels. The woman's forehead wrinkled angrily. The green of her eyes seemed to become more intense, her posture signalling rebellion. Stop. Firstly, these are not 5-inch heels, but 6. And secondly, these things cost a fortune. These are Brian Atwood high heels. She rustled briefly in her shoulder bag and quickly pulled out a pair of wafer-thin, ultra-flat slippers. I'm prepared for everything. Nothing needs to be left behind. She laughed, changed her shoes, and stashed the high heels in a nylon bag, which she had also taken out of her purse. They mounted the bicycles and cycled without exchanging another word, rumbling over the rough pavement toward the main road, the young man in front, the woman behind. She made an effort to catch up with him and shouted at him from behind in Russian accented English. I am a cryptographer, a code breaker. The young man immediately understood the subtext of this statement. An intelligence officer, he thought. When the Russian woman had caught up with him, she laughed, slightly out of breath, and continued. We are here in Berlin at a symposium. I have a doctorate in applied cryptography. When I saw your t-shirt, I knew immediately that you were the contact I was waiting for. I've been scanning everything and everyone for days trying to find you. She gave a short, dark laugh. When I had agreed to go to the USA, the very next day I noticed at my office in Minsk that the only hook on the wall had been broken. I knew that this could not be a coincidence. Pictographically, the hook has a meaning only in Jewish mysticism. It corresponds to the letter Vav and has the numerical value 6. The English alphabet equivalent is the letter W with the numerical value 23, a prime number. But the 6th prime number is 13, so I only had to look for these 2 prime numbers, 23 and 13. She took a short breath, and with a slight triumph in her voice, she said, "The digit sum of 85, the player number on your T-shirt, is 13. I can crack any code." While she was talking, he tried to imagine in which wing of the Secret Service headquarters her office might be located. With its high columned portal, the imposing neoclassical building forced a feeling of awe onto anyone who saw it. His last visit to the White Russian metropolis had been unforgettable. As part of a student exchange with the State University, he had taken part in a colloquium on early Christian iconography. Chapter 21. A few minutes later, a black Mercedes with darkened bulletproof glass sped through the narrow side street. Young Canadian tourists pressed themselves hastily against the crumbling walls of the building. For a split second, they were able to see the azure-blue eyes of the driver with the conspicuous red hair. "What a beauty!" one of the globetrotters marvelled. Horrified, they looked in the direction of the distant car. CC 7777. Like a warning, the White Russian license plate seemed to hang in the air. CC, Corps Consulaire, a diplomatic license plate. No. One of the tourists felt an icy draft down his back. The agent, disguised as the tourist, knew that CC stands for SS in the Cyrillic alphabet, the abbreviation for Secret Service, Sekretnaya Sluzba. They don't even bother to hide it. His pulse rate increased. Time is running out. His thoughts were spinning. The tourists were being watched by a middle-aged man in a plain grey suit. His eyeglasses with conspicuously strong lenses of at least 8 diopters gave him the determined expression of an examining magistrate. The woman by his side, dressed in a sporty, somewhat military style, had her short blonde hair gelled back. She scanned the group of tourists with pale blue, emotionless eyes. Then she turned to her companion with a cold smile and said softly, "The second from the right." Chapter 22. The two young people on their bicycles continued their way unsuspectingly. They were so far ahead that they had not even noticed that they were being pursued. "Where are we going? Where are we actually going? What is our destination?" He could detect some slight annoyance in her voice. "I don't know," he replied honestly. The airstream helped cool the excitement provoked by the beautiful blonde and refocused his thoughts on the job. He thought of the poster of Alfred Dublin under which they had found the bicycles. Alfred Dublin's principal work was Berlin Alexanderplatz, which was why the young man led the woman to Alexanderplatz. They parked the bikes in front of the subway station. "You're not very talkative, and you look like a student," the Russian said, and laughed out loud. They walked across Alexanderplatz. The young man knew that he would find number 13, his contact person, here. The square was crowded with tourists from all over the world. He tried to get an overview and looked around briefly. Street musicians were playing about 150 feet away. They went over to them. The musicians were Peruvian panpipe players, dressed in colourful ponchos, stomping rhythmically back and forth in a semicircle, playing traditional Indian music from the Andes. The music was, however, constantly and obtrusively disturbed by a strangely vicious-looking dwarf. The dwarf wore red trousers and a red shirt, from which a yellow tie stood out in garish contrast. A crooked tricorn covered his head, the kind that captains wear in pirate movies. He gave the impression of a neglected vagrant, and with his grey beard and long grey hair, was somewhat reminiscent of Karl Marx. With grotesque, extensive contortions, he danced to the music, continuously croaking loudly, "I am an empress! I am an empress!" As wildly as he swung his arms and legs, swaying right, left, up and down, he was careful to always jump around the same spot, where a white chalk scrawl had been made on the concrete pavement. His right hand clasped a newspaper on which an upside-down cross had been painted with a thick black felt marker, and which he swung like a flag. Everything seemed very strange. The passers-by gave him a wide berth and were embarrassed, trying not to collide with him. The somewhat irritated musicians tried to concentrate on their music with stoic calm. Chapter 23. "That's a real nutcase. Let's keep our distance. He's totally out of it." The Russian cast disapproving glances toward the young man. "What are we doing here anyway? Who are we looking for?" She looked around, trying to find a clue somewhere. There are too many people here, and someone could find us, she said. While the dwarf continued his grotesque dance, screaming, "I am an empress," in a ceaselessly energetic, obtrusive manner, Bio tried to think. To an outsider, the situation would seem merely absurd. For him, however, it contained essential information, and he began to analyse the unusual circumstances, capturing the key moments and putting everything into context. A dwarf in red clothes with a yellow tie and a captain's hat, jumping about on a chalk drawing. He felt the nerve fibres in his brain running hot. The yellow tie, a secret sign, the code for the sun. Dwarf and sun. A dwarf sun. Captain Star. He remembered. A red dwarf sun in the constellation Painter. That fits. Next, Captain Star, distance to Earth, 13 light years, to be observed in the southern hemisphere. There it is again, a reference to the 13 and southern hemisphere. He recalculated while rigidly homing in on the bouncing dwarf. The newspaper, the St. Peter's Cross on the newspaper. He concentrated deeply. Correct, a code for the Southern Cross constellation. The signs are converging, he whispered to his companion. Everything fits together. The dwarf is number 13, our contact, which gives us the coordinates for our destination. The Russian shrugged her shoulders in disbelief and looked at him questioningly. You claim you can break any code? He looked up, amused. Then he concentrated on the signs again. The Southern Cross refers to Sudkrut subway station. He looked at the chalk markings on the floor. And here we have the Chinese character radical number 76. He exhaled noisily, went to the musicians at the sales table and took one of the CDs for sale from the stack. He did not see a price tag and asked in a loud voice in the direction of the seller, "Is €7.60 okay?" The strange dwarf picked up the words and slowed his rhythmic contortions. He understood that his assignment had been successfully completed and shuffled away. "Come," said the young man, and pulled the white Russian woman along with him. "It seems to me that we are walking through the city in a completely senseless way," his companion snapped at him from his side. "Now you're buying a CD. Are we going shopping now, my music lover? What is this?" Svetlana stamped her right foot stubbornly. "I had expected that we would wait in a hotel room, but you act as if you know exactly where we are going. You'd better explain to me how you communicate with your group. I can't decipher your trace routing algorithm." So much for I can break any code, Bio thought, somewhat maliciously, preferring not to answer. They took the subway and a few stations down the line, changed to the S-Bahn. They did not speak a word to each other the whole time. The young man pondered the network diagram of the Berlin Public Transportation Company. Eventually, he managed to direct his thoughts back to the job. He realized that with the Chinese character radical 76, the dwarf had hinted at continuing his journey by bus. When they arrived at Sudkrut station, they followed the pictograms to the bus stops. He skimmed the timetable and discovered express bus number 76. 7 plus 6 equals 13. Numbers don't lie, he thought. Everything falls into place. He scanned the bus stops. "That seems to be our bus," he heard the young Russian woman say. She had also decoded the message. They took the waiting express bus and got off at the Augusta Victoria Clinic. The dwarf had shouted, "I am an empress," pointing the way precisely. Augusta Victoria, the last empress of Prussia. At the bus stop, a ragged homeless man lurked, slurring a rhyme in a drunken voice. 13 men on the dead man's chest, yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum, la-la-la-la. Waiting passengers maintained a disgusted distance. As the young man and the Russian woman passed by, the drunk man rose and left to the relief of all bystanders. That was the pirate song from Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, Bio thought. The difference being that the book does not speak of 13 men, but 15. 15 men on the dead man's chest. The young woman had not noticed any of this. They entered the spacious hospital grounds and followed the signs to Ward 15, the Institute of Psychiatry. When the Russian read the sign for the ward, she sighed and indignantly addressed the young man. "Are you serious? I'm to hide in the psychiatric ward? And in a closed ward at that?" He replied boldly, "This is the safest place in town for you right now, and do not worry, you'll be picked up at the right time." He rang the bell. A doctor opened. Dr. Nitschke was written on his nameplate. "Good afternoon, Svetlana Sergeyevna. You are safe now. Welcome to the free world." An enigmatic smile gleamed on his face. Svetlana Sergeyevna looked at him wordlessly, turned to the young man and whispered, "I am a cryptographer. I can crack any code." The nylon bag hung limply from her arm. She looked down, dropped her slim neck helplessly between her shoulders and went inside. The padded door shut almost noiselessly behind her. Chapter 25. Knowing Svetlana Sergeyevna was safe, Bio left the clinic and went to Café Eliade to get further instructions from his mentor. From outside on the street, he could hear the piano music through the half-opened front door. The allegro molto of Walpurgis Night made him pause for a moment, and he saw himself standing abandoned outside the gate of the children's home. This is where the music stopped, he thought wistfully as he stepped across the threshold. We've lost contact with our shadow at the diner. The talented fingers of the old Oriental man flew dreamlike across the stained keys of the battered piano. The young man answered the pianist with a mute nod, and for a few more moments immersed himself totally in Rachmaninoff's Piano Sonata No. 1. Then he sat in one of the wicker chairs and let his gaze wander around the semi-darkness of the small artist's cafe. A good dozen or so listeners were following the Persian's masterful playing, spellbound. If only you knew, Bio thought. But none of the guests gathered here even suspected that this inconspicuous, aged and somewhat unkempt older man had been celebrated in a previous life for his brilliant interpretations of classical piano music in the concert hall. The young man watched the listeners with interest for a few minutes and then again surrendered to the music's magic. He closed his eyes and began to draw invisible patterns on the marble tabletop with the fingers of his right hand. His thoughts drifted away. The enthusiastic applause brought him back to reality. The old pianist bowed deeply before his audience. His shoulder-length grey hair flew forward in a bold swing, just like he used to do in the concert hall, Bio thought, and waited for his mentor to join him. The old Persian lit a Gouda Garam clove cigarette and said, "They are ransacking the entire city for her." He pushed his chair to the table and spoke to the young man in a low voice. "This is out of your league. You are no match for a raging convoy of 300 horsepower Belarus brand tractors. They will take care of things and then go to play ice hockey. We must get you to safety as well. In 15 minutes, an ambulance will come to pick you up. But there is still time for us both to have a drink together." The beer was spiked. Bon voyage. Bio was frightened by the Oriental's sardonic grin. Then the thread snapped, and his ego momentarily drowned in shapeless blackness. Chapter 26. Bio awoke and at first did not understand where he was. The harsh white neon light blinded him. He blinked, rubbed his left hand across his sticky eyelids and peeked out from beneath his blanket in amazement. "Everything is white here," he mused, and for a few seconds he looked uncomprehendingly at the bed trapeze dangling overhead and then at the tube that led from the back of his right hand to a stand next to his bed. "A hospital?" he whispered. "Why on earth am I in a hospital?" He looked across at a freshly made empty bed. "I am alone in a double room." "Grab the control panel and move the head of the bed up by 45 degrees. The rasping voice that sounded so unexpected and loud, it startled him. "That way we can look at each other when we speak." At the foot of his bed sat a small, chubby, middle-aged woman with chin-length brunette hair curling around a pale face. "You have been asleep for 2 days, my dear." The unpretentious-looking Eastern European woman spoke again, while a tall, slender nurse with deep blue eyes and long blonde hair caught in a topknot changed the IV drip. Sophie got up, moved to the head of the bed, and continued, annoyed. "Why do you always have to swallow this crap? You completely freaked out and smashed up half the cafe." While she was talking, she put Elias Canetti's book, Comedy of Vanity, on the table. There was a bookmark between pages 132 and 133. "You are lucky to have Sophie," the nurse said. "She was by your bedside all day." A doctor with rimless glasses entered the room. "Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Anschutz. I am a psychiatrist." She looks Oriental, but has a German name, maybe half Turkish, the young man thought. Her long hair, dyed with henna, fell softly to her shoulders. She wore sneakers and, under her open white doctor's coat, a T-shirt with the slogan, "Save the Dolphins." Her appearance radiated a smug arrogance. An animal rights activist, Bio joked to himself. A campaigner against the narcissistic, capitalistic destruction of natural habitats of disenfranchised creatures. He looked at her and could not wholly suppress a smug smile. There you are, fighting against the repressive authority of societal conditioning, you new type of animal and human rights activist, you vanguard of human development. Dr. Anschutz fixed a strict gaze on him for a few seconds and interrupted his inner monologue. You went on a rampage. You are a danger to society, at least for now. We will keep you here for the time being. Her studiously brusque voice reinforced the impression of arrogance she emanated. The young man felt an erotic attraction to this woman, who might be about 5 years older than him. Once you're feeling steadier, we'll talk in my office in an hour. I'll need additional information from you for my report to the head of the department. He nodded at her, but she had already turned and was leaving the room. You conceited bitch, he called after her, in his thoughts. Honey, Sophie said in a casual tone, I brought you the daily paper. She handed him the newspaper, opened at page 11. Even before he picked it up, he could see the headlines, which instantly caused him great consternation. Rampage of destruction. Sheet music archive set on fire. Former concert pianist sets his apartment on fire and disappears. Chapter 27. In the afternoon, Sophie and Bio took a walk in the hospital gardens, which were extensive and surrounded by a perimeter fence. Something has gone wrong, Sophie warned. The White Russian disappeared 30 minutes ago. They are tracking all our people, and you are to be released from the psychiatric ward in 20 minutes. However, Dr. Anschutz is making trouble. She wants to keep you here. We had to intervene discreetly. While Sophie was speaking, two tall, vicious-looking patients in tracksuits and sneakers set off from the neighbouring station and rapidly walked toward them. From their appearance, they were Central Asians, Kazakhs or Kyrgyz. The sleeves of their tracksuits were rolled up. Sophie immediately recognised the danger. You are not to go back to the ward. If anyone asks you, you say that you want to buy candies in the canteen. Take the shortest route out of the clinic and go to the Black Cafe. There you order black pelmeni with a salmon filling, not with cheese sauce, but with ketchup. That is the SOS signal. I'll deal with these two. The young man straightened up and, already slightly panicked, moved away toward the exit. Despite her chubby appearance, Sophie was nimble on her feet. She pulled the belt out of her waistband and rushed toward the two men, each of them about 6 feet tall. One of the guys shouted at her in a mocking voice, I'll pump you up, bitch. Bio looked back while he walked and saw the little woman knock her first opponent to the ground with lightning-fast, hard Krav Maga punches. Then he heard an electrical crackle. Sophie's belt was electrically charged. She smashed it against the upper body of the man who had taunted her, and he immediately dropped to the ground, twitching uncontrollably. The first man got up again, and Sophie swung the electric whip, but missed him several times, as he managed to evade her powerful blows with the skilled leg movements of a boxer. As the man pulled a spray can from his pocket, Sophie screamed, Go, go, go! Bio ran as fast as he could and fled from the hospital by the fastest route. Chapter 28. The year 2008 was your most successful year, girl. The man in the grey suit remarked in a sonorous voice, sizing up the young woman through his 8-diopter strength glasses. The shadow in the cafe, Svetlana muttered thoughtfully and stirred her cup. For about 10 minutes the only sound was the scratching of silverware on porcelain. Then the man cleared his throat. He sat quietly at the table, radiating authoritarian strength. Good work. Excellent work, girl. I always knew that only you could do it, he said, stroking his narrow grey moustache. Svetlana's emerald green gaze drilled questioningly into the eyes of her superior. Did you neutralize them all 2 years ago? Even the young man? That would be a pity. He was a good boy, still wet behind the ears, so naive. We always let one unimportant person get away so that he can go off and talk. The man smiled. Then maybe one day they will learn not to play ice hockey with us without good reason. But the old Oriental has escaped in a most bizarre way. There was an accident involving a truck on the highway. He got out of the car and continued on roller skates. Since the highway was closed, our people could not follow him. This kind of thing does not normally happen to us. But well, we will get him too, eventually. Do not worry, girl. At least I had the hook put back in. And, oh, he stroked the velvet-covered folder tenderly with his strong fingers. Congratulations on your promotion, Comrade Colonel. I was on a hillside. Behind me, a rocky wall rose hundreds of meters steeply upward. The air was foggy, and the sun was only visible as a pale, spongy silhouette in the grey sky. The area I was on measured about 20 meters in length and 30 meters in width. After walking a few steps on the soaking wet, loamy ground, I saw that the edge of the expanse seemed to lose itself in a vast infinite darkness. There was nothing here, nothing but complete emptiness and absolute silence. I had expected something else. I did not sense any form of life, no one I could have talked to. The place seemed to have fallen out of time. Its uniformity was overwhelming. Not a breath of wind stirred. There was no detectable atmosphere. I no longer perceived my own breath. I just felt that I must be breathing. Apart from me, only my shadow moved across the muddy ground. I turned around and lifted my gaze toward the top of the mountain without being able to see the summit. The rock also appeared to lose itself in infinity. Amid this silent scenery, I noticed a colourless, transparent rock crystal on the steep rock face. About 7 feet high and 3 feet wide, this crystal was located about 2 feet up the slope. I decided to take a closer look. My shadow began to move, and in its wake I reached my destination. With my left hand I touched the bright surface. It was permeable, and my hand suddenly was inside. I gazed at it in amazement. It seemed to me like a jewel trapped in amber. I pulled my hand out again and tried to touch the crystal again. When my hand vanished inside the permeable surface for the second time, I decided to enter with my whole body. I nestled my right side against the sparkling outer surface, turned around as if in slow motion, and the next moment found myself inside the crystal, surrounded by its translucent shell. As I remained motionless, a gradually increasing delicate chant of soft, high notes reached my ears, and my eyes perceived an iridescent flicker. Where did these high notes and the iridescent reflections of light come from? I pushed my upper body through the crystal to the outside, and the sound and the flickering light stopped. Re-entering the crystal, I tried to analyze where the sound and the flickering came from. Suddenly, I realized that the flickering light was the sun. The sun was flickering. But why was the sun flickering? Then I understood. The flickering of the sun was day and night. Time was running as if speeded up. The crystal existed in its own subjective time. Locked within it, I was able to understand the crystal's perception of time. The high tones, on the other hand, came from the vibration of the crystal. Outside of the crystal, I could not hear any of this because the vibrations in my own time were too long-waved and the pitch was much too low. But inside the crystal, I could hear the chanting in the crystal's own time. Then I realized that the crystal was a living being. The Hierophant finished reading the text and looked up. I like your evocation of the element earth. A young man sat opposite him and peacefully ate black pelmeni with salmon filling and cheese sauce. This exclusive dish is served to gourmets from all over the city in this cafe only. A real insider's tip, Bio remarked and lost himself in memories. When he had to flee the clinic 4 years ago, Sophie had told him to go to the Black Cafe and order these special dumplings. He had never seen the small, chubby woman again. He was overcome by a moment of profound sadness. Furthermore, he thought of his mentor, the old Persian who had also disappeared. The white Russian agents had allowed him to escape. He was the only one. They knew who he was, but they left him alone in the city in a kind of gentleman's agreement. He had understood that it was better to stay away from them. Thus, his intelligence career was over before it had even really begun, which was why he could now devote himself mainly to cultural work and research on religious anthropology. His training period was now over in the cold autumn of 2010, and he would soon leave Berlin. The Hierophant continued speaking. You have made rapid progress. Now you are ready for the next step. I will report this to the appropriate authority. Consistency is the key.